that no longer exists the way I knew it, but is still present as a foundation of my life and in the lives of my brother and my sisters. So we have slide 1, and that one. Okay, this is it. This is the tent colony. This is a stretch of woods beside Lake Mendota in Madison, Wisconsin. The land was owned and is still owned by the University of Wisconsin, and they made it available for over 50 years to graduate students and their families to live in. And they started this practice before World War I, so it went back a long time. The university provided platforms for tents or tent houses, and you can see what they kind of look like there. They provided a pump, a pier out into the lake, and outhouses at the top of the hill. The area was defined by a rough, rocky road that encircled the area. We knew exactly where it started and ended. Cars did not go down that road, except very slowly. We lived in this stretch of the woods by the lake for 11 summers, from the time I was 4 years old until I was 14. We had no electricity, no running water, and no telephone for 3 months of the year. Slide 2. Our tent house had tar paper walls, mosquito netting for the windows, and a tarpaulin for the roof. We began building it at the beginning of every summer. That's us there. And we took it down, slide number 3, at the end of the summer. That's what it looks like. That's its skeleton. Why is the connection to this place still important to me? In reflecting, 3 things come to mind. The security and beauty of the place. Number 4, slide number 4. In these woods, we felt totally at home. When returning, it was so good to be in the familiarity and coolness of the greenness. We could breathe and be fully refreshed. We were at home. Socially, we were a unit. Mother, father, children, we were together. We were each of us important, and we couldn't imagine a life without all of us. Number 5. We had chores, but they weren't chores. They were things we did because they needed doing. And we almost always did them with others. We were helping. Number 6, we were part of a larger social unit. There were about 30 households each summer at the tent colony. Some of the households were just single men, single graduate students, but others had young families. We knew each person, and they knew us. And even the children had roles. For example, we were the town criers with our pot and pan band, and we would remind every household when there was a camp meeting or a potluck. And it really did make lots of noise. And finally, there was structure, both in our family and in the larger community. We knew the rhythms of the day and of the weeks and of the months. We as kids knew the rules, both informally and formally. Our parents trusted us. When we were not needed at home, we would head down the road to see what was happening. We would invent games, climb trees, explore paths, build forts. We sang songs, we told stories. We were independent. My brother called us free-range kids, but we were trusted and responsible. Number 7, okay, here we are. These factors I carry with me as I seek to connect to other places. I feel most comfortable in places of beauty, where one finds security, social ties, structure, and the opportunity to be oneself and to contribute in one's own way. Kind of like this place here. I would like to close with 2 things, some words of my mother and some from a sister. I'll try not to get choked up. Okay. These are words that my mother wrote in the last newsletter in the last year of the tent colony when it was closed forever. It was written as an editorial, but I found the words so poetic that I have edited and presented as a poem. And this is the view of the lake from our house, or from our tent house. Standing on the pier just after sunset, we can see the silhouette of hills that Black Hawk or a mound builder could have seen. There is little changed from centuries past. Part of the tenting life has the same truth. This is the way the wind roared over the flimsy shelters. This is the way the sunshine was cut up by the rippling lake. It's playing house for us, of course, partly. When the rain soaks clothes, we can repair to the laundromat. The tent walls aren't the only shelter. We can evacuate to the student union. But our ears get tuned to different melodies, and we can understand past years and other worlds a little. The final slide shows the woods and the road as it is today. It is a running trail along the lake. Most of my siblings and I have visited here. I looked for familiar trees and landmarks. One of my sisters had a totally different experience. The trees, she said, knew her. She never had such an experience, she said. Welcome home. So our reading today is taken from a work by Ben Wendell Berry from his work Sabbaths, number 6. It is hard to have hope. It is harder as you grow old. For hope must not depend on feeling good, and there is the dream of loneliness at absolute midnight. You also have withdrawn belief in the present reality of the future, which surely will surprise us. And hope is harder when it cannot come by prediction, and more than by wishing. But stop dithering. The young ask the old to hope. What will you tell them? Tell them at least what you say to yourself. Because we have not made our lives to fit our places, the forests are ruined, the fields eroded, the streams polluted, the mountains overturned. Hope, then, to belong to your place by your knowledge of what it is that no other place is, and by your caring for it as you care for no other place, this place that you belong to, though it is not yours, for it was from the beginning, and it will be to the end. Belong to your place by knowledge of the others who are your neighbors in it. The old man, sick and poor, who comes like a heron to fish in the creek, and the fish in the creek, like a heron to fish in the creek, and the fish in the creek, and the birds who sing in the trees in the silence of the fisherman and the heron, and the trees that keep the land they stand upon. So we too must keep it or die. This knowledge cannot be taken from you by power or by wealth. It will stop your ears to the powerful when they ask for your faith, and the wealthy when they ask for your land and your work. Answer with knowledge of the others who are here, and how to be here with them. By this knowledge, make the sense you need to make. By it, stand in the dignity of good sense, whatever may follow. Found your hope, then, on the ground under your feet. Your hope of heaven, let it rest on the ground underfoot. Be lighted by the light that falls freely upon it after the darkness of the nights and the darkness of our ignorance and madness. Let it be lighted also by the light that is within you, which is the light of imagination. By it, see the likeness of people in other places to yourself in your place. It lights invariable the need for care towards other people, other creatures in other places, as you would ask them for care towards your place and you. No place at last is better than the world. The world is not better than its places. Its places are at last no better than their people, while their people continue in them. When the people make dark the light within them, the world darkens. Now we'll have Stacy give her message.
Thank you so much, Marilee. I don't know if there's any lights that need to be dimmed. I too have a slideshow to share. In 2008, Alan purchased a fixer-upper house. The cost was $1, but we had to clean it out and move it. What a deal. This is the story of peeling back the layers of restoring an early 1900s Finnish hand-hewn log cabin. But there is another layer to this story. One, as a young adult, my love language was freedom. I never intended to get married or settle down. I carried a protective shell, a shield, and never let anyone get too close to me. In college, I encountered a relational worldview. I am because we are. And this includes inanimate beings such as water and rock, along with humans, plants, and animals. To step out of being in relationship and prove up a homestead, be self-sufficient out in the woods, is both impossible and immoral in a relational worldview. Safety and wellness come from living harmoniously and in relationship. These teachings cracked that protective seed covering and allowed for the tiniest root hairs to emerge. So when Alan brought me to 20-acre parcel and asked me to marry him and build a life there, I said yes. Little did I know what I was getting into. What we knew about the structure Alan had purchased that was to become our home was that it was built by a Finnish immigrant named Simo. It measured 18 by 22 and the logs were cedar and hemlock. In the late 1800s, waves of immigrants from Norway, Finland, and Sweden found their way to northern climates such as northern Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota because it reminded them of home. They were arriving in the US, and unlike the British, Scottish, Polish, and other immigrants who came from countries where lumber was owned by the king or private landowners, the Scandinavians still lived in areas where timber was accessible, and they had tremendous building skills. The difference can be seen in the craftsmanship. The British, for example, typically used round logs, and the gaps between these logs were large, making it hard to live in winter locations. The Scandinavian cabins are built of square logs with dovetail corners, as you can see in this photo. They stand through the cold winter winds. Many Scandinavian settlers built these, and they are still around today. Log homes that they built were often covered in shiplap siding on the outside, and on the inside they were plastered and wallpapered over because you wanted to hide the logs. That was a sign of poverty or lower class. But this also protected the logs from the elements. But still, even though a couple of courses were visible, we had no idea if the logs were going to be solid, if they would be rotted, if they would even stand to be a home. And it would take us an entire summer to peel back all of these layers to find out if this house was even viable. My job for this summer was to peel the wallpaper off the walls. I found 11 layers: wallpaper, particle board, more wallpaper, cardboard, flour sacks, and finally hand-hammered tobacco tins placed over the large gaps between the logs. And between those, there was moss, the original moss that people had found and put between the logs like chink. We learned a lot about Finnish construction. If a 1-penny nail would do, they used a 2-penny nail. If 2 nails would hold something, they used 3. The standing structures are testaments of this care and craftsmanship, but it takes a long time to undo their work. We asked a local log wright to assess the integrity of the logs, and he came out, he walked around the house and stabbed various logs and joints with his belt knife. He gave it the A+. Looks good. It's not punky, he said. It passed the test. The roof beams would not support a modern roof, so we made them into a wedding arbor on the 20 acres down the road. Working full time, working on the cabin. You know, in our free time, we planned an August wedding. Why not? It was around this time when we found a tin-typed Valentine that was hiding in the walls of the cabin. It was in Finnish, a love note from one to the other, and it seemed like a good sign. We stood underneath those old roof beams and made our vows to grow deep roots to place and to one another. The cabin was located 13 miles from the land, so we had to move it. And we removed the roof beams and gable ends. Originally, we'd planned to take it down piece by piece, which you can do because when you have dovetail joints, there's no nails. It's all just fit together like a puzzle. And if you number them correctly, you can take them down and then put them back together. But look at the closeness, look at the tightness of these logs. We would never be able to get them back to that perfection. They were just so well done. So we decided to move it as a full unit, respecting the craftsmanship of Simo. Now, I'd share this photo with the caveat, this is not to code. Yes, we found an oversized load sign, we had a staple gun, and we got this guy to come over and put it on this flatbed truck. Strangely, all of our friends drove the other way when we started driving down the street to get it to the property. Now, several of our neighbors knew we were moving that day, and they sat out in their front yards and waved at us as we came by, and there was actually this whole parade of cars that joined us as we drove down the gravel roads. Almost home. Almost a home. We put in a modern foundation and set the house, the logs on top of it. Now, we tried to insure the logs before we moved them. And what we found out was that in order to find logs of this size of cedar and hemlock, the only place that they exist right now is in Alaska. And you would have to log them with a helicopter because there's no roads to those trees. So the price to insure these logs that were going to be bulldozed and just basically were thought of as trash that we bought for $1, they're pretty priceless. The restoration began. Where there was a little bit of rot, we spliced in new wood. Where there was a lot of rot, we made windows and doors. The new roof beams came from dead spruce trees that were standing on the property. We used chainsaws to cut them down, heavy chains and a backhoe to drag them up the hill. We had several draw knives to peel back the bark, and we left them round so we didn't even have to square them, which is done by taking an axe and cutting X's down the log and then shaving off the sides so that it is a square. We didn't even have to do that. And still, these 3 logs are new roof beams. That was the hardest I've ever worked in my entire life. There wasn't a part of me that didn't hurt after working on these 3 trees. I have no idea how Simo did this. He probably didn't have a horse. He obviously didn't have a chainsaw, maybe what they call a misery saw, an axe, perhaps a neighbor. Sandblasting is like a facial for logs. One friend sandblasted the logs as a wedding present to us. What a makeover. A father and his 2 sons did the restoration work alongside Alan. And one day we arrived home to find they had cut these scrolls into the wood. They are beautiful. They didn't even tell us they were going to do this. And I just loved it so much because it continued the element of craft and the beauty and care that was imbued in this structure from its inception. That first winter came and we just got it sealed up. There is no insulation in the walls. It is just the thermal mass of the logs that keeps it cool in the summer and warm in the winter. But in between the logs, we have put foam And over the foam is this product called permachink that allows the logs to breathe as they expand in humidity and contract in dry. The permachink breathes with them. Underneath the wood stove is stones from our favorite date, walking the beaches of Lake Superior. At our table, at our kitchen table, sits one red chair, which we fondly refer to as Simo's chair. The red chair and red windowsills are a tribute to the cabin's heritage. Simo, we found out, was a member of the International Workers of the World and led gatherings for human rights and workers' rights in the Pinocchi Mountain region where we live. We speculate that the conversations we have around the table, discussions about our hopes and dreams for a vibrant and healthy community, justice and peace, are conversations that have happened here before. This is our home. I often say it isn't mine to keep. I'm just taking care of it for a while. During the pandemic, Alan was out working in the world. I was confined to this home with Ringo, our German short hair. And this is when I truly became present enough to know that our home was a sanctuary. But that was Alan's plan all along. With the design inspired by Listening Point, the cabin of author and conservationist Sigurd F. Olsen, who penned the Wilderness Act. David Bacchus, Sig's biographer, wrote that Sig evolved a land ethic of a person who believed that we find the deepest fulfillment when, whether in the wilderness or in their backyard, they do simple things that are in harmony with their surroundings and their evolutionary heritage as human beings. Alan placed the house where it could blend organically. A site that once landscaped would seem as though it had always cradled the house. The blending of the old with the new was one way we worked to find harmony. And it wasn't just the structure, but also we began to live seasonally. And this is Alan. I don't know that anyone's ever met Alan. He looks quite like the mountain man in this photo. This is our sugar bush, which is where we tap maple trees to make maple syrup. And this is something we're doing right now, and we do it each spring. We've learned from a lot of the folks around here how to do it, and from the squirrels. In the summer, I compost food scraps and leaves into beautiful soil. I start seeds, I plant, water, weed. I harvest and I cook and I eat. Strawberry pie on the 4th of July is a favorite. We grow heirloom vegetables and apples, garlic, asparagus, raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, tomatoes, cucumber, and flowers. Fall is the time to harvest, the time to hunt, and time to practice gratitude. In her book, All About Love, Bell Hooks writes, when we value the delaying of gratification and take responsibility for our actions, we simplify our emotional universe. Living simply makes loving simple. The choice to live simply necessarily enhances our capacity to love. It is the way we learn to practice compassion, daily affirming our connection to the world community. Winter is when we reflect, rest, heal, read, and tell stories. We blended old technologies with new. We have running water and a clothes washer, and every day in the winter we haul firewood because our primary heat is the wood stove. And winter is my favorite season to play, when there's snow, of course. And I just had to throw in a photo. This is my first dog sledding team, my first dog sledding race. I was pretty young there, but the Iditarod's on, and that's always a highlight for me. When I heard the term sense of place as a young person, I scoffed. Sense of place. Is it one or isn't it? How can you have a sense of it? As we peeled back the layers of meaning and connection, I finally understood this term, sense of place. Practically, this cabin grounds Alan and I to this area. The work we did preserves in a functional way the history of this place, not as a museum would, but in the tradition it was meant for, a living place. It is a traditional building style which connects us to the global community of people of northern areas. But sense of place has to do with continuity. Knowing where you are helps you know who you are. When you are present with the seasons, you know things, sequences of when birds arrive and apple blossoms bud. The cycles of time around you, no matter what chaos is in the world, the moon waxes every month, growing large, and it comes up between these two particular trees on the full moon. In all these connections, you begin to belong. Roots grow. These roots allow you to rise. In the web of life, you are completely interdependent on the water, land, animals, sun, and wind, and your neighbors. Now I know how animated life can be when you let that hard seed shell down and root into connection, taking that ultimate trust that the web will hold you. And having these roots, I know I can be transplanted and reroot in another place. Sense of place doesn't mean that you are stuck in one place. It simply means everything is holy now. Thank you so much. Blessing be.